Gordon, one of the things that you said to me years ago when we first started talking about Chicago bidding for the Olympics was, no way will Chicago get the Olympics. And then you said, unless Barack Obama is elected president. And I remember saying that around some peace activists, including Tom Hayden, and he kind of lit up by that and realized that that was the case. And I would like you to go back to your prediction and give us a little report as a track and field insider on what you think the status of the Chicago's Olympic bid is and the chances of Chicago getting it as opposed to somewhere in Brazil or somewhere in Japan, etc.
Well, right now, Chicago is the front runner. There's 4 cities in the mix. So right now, Chicago's the leading candidate of Tokyo, Madrid, Spain, and Rio de Janeiro. And all 4 sites have had to submit an application package, which are now available online most recently. And if you just look at the online application process, which totally review all the cities, then here's the ranking order of that internet available. Tokyo had the best package, the best total package of sustaining venues that are already there, as well as transportation, and as well as running a most efficient. Chicago's got the runner-up position as far as that package presents, as far as existing transportation, existing venues, impact, and so forth. Third on the list is Rio de Janeiro, and then a big gap down to Madrid. Quite frankly, I think Chicago is going to have now an uphill battle a little bit, because we get this original claim that I had years ago was, if Barack was elected, still rings true. If Barack makes the final presentation on October 2nd, just as Tony Blair did for London, make the final presentation, then yeah, Chicago's going to win. What's coming up immediately for Chicago is April 4, 2009, the review panel for the Olympic Committee, International Olympic Committee, comes to visit Chicago first, visit Chicago over the other 4 cities. And they claim it was logistics, but when you're the opening round, you get to make your bid opening. It's a little advantage. So what they'll do is they'll review existing venues, look at all the transportation, the hardcore transportation setup. They'll hop on an L train, you bet, and they'll cruise around. They'll look at all the downtown environment at the Loop, plus they'll visit where the Village is prospected to be built, and they'll review the books, which is the least important part of the process, and then they'll go on to the next city. They'll go on to Tokyo, then they'll go on to Rio, and then followed by Madrid, all in one right after the other. So we got the first chance to look in April 4 through the 7th for 3 days.
Gordon Thomson, a few weeks ago, Katie Hogan was the host of this show, and she had on a fellow named Christopher Shaw out of Vancouver, who wrote a book documenting how municipalities have basically been screwed by every Olympics that's come to their town. He had a fellow named Bob Quinlan, who's involved with a local organization that opposes the Olympics. And you and I, both as members of Athletes United for Peace, have had some discussions about how wonderful it would be to have the Olympics here, and how one of the things would be an opportunity for not only for new facilities for the city, but also for the Park District and for high schools. You know, you've talked many times about inner city high school kids having to run track in their hallways. So we like to think that the Olympics could leave a residue of good stuff. And when I proposed that after Katie interviewed Shaw, he basically said every city wants that. Everybody talks about getting something from the Olympic events that would benefit their city over time, and no one gets it. So there is an opposition to the Olympics from often it's progressive people who are concerned about transportation and urban renewal and housing and poor people being removed and forced out. What's your take on Shaw's thing about you can't really stop it, and how one would make a better stand when Olympics come to town, turn it into a good thing, not only for the few weeks that we have the Olympic events, but for years to come after that.
Well, Shaw's take is he's from Vancouver, and they're going to host the next Olympic Games, 2010 Winter Games. And, yeah, there was a huge environmental impact of hosting the Winter Games there.
Cutting down forests.
Tons of acres of trees were clear-cutted to create venues for the Winter Games. And indigenous populations were impacted, so forth. So, yeah, there's been a lot of negative backlash for Vancouver as a site as well. There should be a negative backlash for Chicago to host the games. This is a really healthy process, and part of the whole equation is to have opposition, to really hold the local organizing committees, which Chicago's got a very extensive organizing committee, to hold them accountable and to hold their projects and the budgetary process accountable. Looking over Chicago's package in detail, the budgetary process, I mean, that's creative accounting to the T. I mean, to try and account.
That'd be negative, right?
Very negative. I mean, Chicago will pay for the games one way or the other. And if you live here, you're going to pay for it directly. You already have a TIF on your hands. So, yeah, there's going to be a big environmental impact on Vancouver's, but I don't think a negative environmental impact on Chicago's games. Yeah, there will be some existing structures available, but really Chicago's largely got to start from scratch. There's no track and field, which is the highlight and focus of the game. There's no track and field stadium. You got to build one in Washington Park, and the plans are to have a big deal and then rescale it down after the games.
What would you recommend for activists, whether, let's say there are some people who would like the games as well as people who don't want the games but would certainly be open to it if what? What should people demand? What should people organize around? Because I'm assuming, and I said it to both Bob Quinlan and to Christopher Shaw, that I think Chicago will get it. And while in Vancouver there's been a resurgence of opposition led by Native Americans or Native Canadians, well, Native North Americans, we would say. How about here in Chicago?
Well, let me give you a little bit of the drama behind the scenes on the selection process. When they have the final vote on October the 2nd, there's going to be the Olympic Committee, the guys and gals that are making this vote, the 177 members of the International Olympic Committee. They're going to look at the presentation package. So the person making the presentation package, the International Olympic Committee representative is a lady, the head of the delegation is a lady by the name of Nawa El Matawakil, who went to school here in the States. She's the first Muslim woman to win a gold medal in the Olympic Games in 1984.
Where did she run? Was she out of Iowa?
She ran at Iowa State University, was a 400 hurdler in Iowa State. She's been to Chicago. As a collegian, she was in Chicago. She's familiar with this. She's the head of the International Olympic Committee evaluation team to evaluate all these sites. So I think she's going to have a favorable view towards Chicago, but a very fair view. Well, she's going to make these packages available. Well, guess what? She did the same thing for 2012 and painted Paris as to be the favored city, only to have that totally upturned at the last minute with Tony Blair pulling the trump card. That's the only thing we're going to hope for, is that Barack is going to pull the trump card for us. So it's going to be a dicey deal right up to the last minute. One final comment on these 177. They do not like to be predicted. That's why Paris went out on the last election, did not win. Chicago will be favored, and largely because of what we got going for us, but the IOC doesn't like to say, oh, you're going to go ahead and pick this guy. They like to be unpredictable.
Gordon Thomson, when we were talking earlier before the radio show, we talked about, in the long run, you thought that it would be good for Chicago. Not just, a lot of other places are left in debt, and those issues need to be addressed. But why do you think having the Olympics will be good for the city of Chicago?
It's going to leave a tourist imprint for decades to come, not because the existing venues that are left, but for the mere fact that Chicago was an Olympic city. Amsterdam hosted the Olympics in 1924. Very few of the venues are still intact. People still visit Amsterdam to this day to try and look for those venues, try and find them. The history that is involved. There's tons of intricacies that a city. Does it put Chicago in a world city? We're already a world city on many, many fronts. Europeans.
We are the world. We are the center of the universe.
So yes, the tourist impact for decades to come after you host an Olympics is a real deal.